the work session of the council to order. And we know that at least two members of the council can't be here tonight, and so it's going to be recorded, and that'll be available to the council members that aren't here tonight. But let's go ahead and turn it over to City Manager Geertz.
Okay, so there's been multiple challenges this year in creating the 25-26 budget. Number one, and we're gonna go through it when I get into the budget information. The HF 718, you know, I've probably been talking about it. I know Dana's heard it over and over again, and I'm sure at the county level they're hearing it.
Yeah.
But it is a huge impact, and we're starting to feel the pain of it definitely this year. In addition to that, again, I can't say enough appreciation to Clerk Hoffert and working through the encode software. That itself has been challenging as we started the transition of the general fund, and as a part of that, I'll try to keep it as simple as I can, that it's not gone as well as it should have gone. And so this has kind of made some challenges for us to balance out our numbers. So in addition to that, along with the property taxes, the other costs, and then there's just a lot of unknowns yet, as even the federal and the state legislations are working through transitions. As mayor is my witness, you know, Representative Kaufman, you know, just to invite him out to go through writing a budget to see, you know, this is how this works now, so.
He was here on Saturday too, and Senator, I always forget his last name, Carrie Grugan-Hagen, I think. And he had talked about only positive things about this change, because people did bring it up.
Yeah.
And I wasn't too convinced, because I don't understand it fully, but the way that he explained it is that this will allow cities to plan for more than just 1 year, like they can plan for up to 5 years in advance.
Yeah.
And it's very slow moving, but in the end it will help, but he couldn't really explain how exactly it will help, so.
And that's what the mayor and I found very interesting at legislative day, is that, you know, I think for most of us, it's like, careful what you say, because if you can't explain it now, right, how would you even want to talk about it? So, but he did mention to us then that they were gonna roll out this new reform, and essentially it's more like them saying, here's your amount of money you're getting. They would force the county to calculate property tax earlier than what they already are. And then they say, here's your chunk of money, now you gotta figure it out. And yeah, that could be good, because we work with mostly estimates, but at the same time, it still leaves us concerned too, because what if there's not enough, you know, if they say our levy, and then again, like a lot of cities, you don't know your debt levy because you may be getting new debt throughout the year. So those are some challenges, but hey, we'll see where this one goes. It's just like, makes me nervous every time they talk about reforming taxes again, so. So we'll start with the budget basics. And again, bear with me, I appreciate it. Councilmember Dominguez, I know you've been through this before, but I wanted to do some basic stuff, for Tim and some of those that hadn't, but again, just like at home, it's your financial outline. It allows you to estimate what you're looking at for revenues and expenditures. And then create the blueprint of what we're going to work through the fiscal year on. Again, like any household budget, you know, if all goes according to plan, then it all works out just exactly how you lay it out. However, that's not always the case, and that's what comes in with budget amendments and those type of changes that you hear us go through. So for the last several months, our city departments have been working on their budget worksheets. They've been going through there so they can submit requests going into fiscal year, which begins July 1 of 2026 and ends June 30th of 2027. So that's the budget we're preparing for. As we work through that and determine capital improvements, equipment costs, supply costs, but probably the bigger thing that we go through is wage for employee costs. That's probably the bigger percentage. Well, I know for a fact it's the larger percentage of what we have to manage. The next step is for myself and Clerk Hoffert and the Public Works Director and the Library Director. And what we've done is we go through and take another look at it just to make sure we've got finalized numbers. Working through the CIP plan, just making sure that we've got all of that information that we need. And then now here we are, we're at the council and we're going to do the budget work session and go through these items briefly. And once we go through that, then you'll have April, now remind me because there's been some changes and now we have what's called a max tax levy where the best I can explain to you is that that's the first step. There we have to go through, the clerk and I go through to identify. Because what they've done is we've condensed. Prior to this, you were able to have about 20 lines of different tax levies that you could calculate on top of the city's tax levy at 810. Then you could drop down and you could have voted on, or you could have non-voted on. And then you were allowed to get a certain percentage to increase your tax levy to actually balance out the general fund. We no longer can do that under the new legislation. What they've done is, it's not saying that you cannot do it, it's saying that now everything is combined into your 810 levy. However, you cannot grow 3% on an annual basis, which again, it's difficult because then it's saying we're constraining you from growth. They're keeping us from growing our levy. So we can go on to so once we go through that, then we'll go through the budget approval, but, and those now for the max tax levy and the approval of the council, that's what you'll see on the April 15th meeting, correct? But we're gonna be
First is the
April
max
1st.
tax levy. Yeah, and then the 15th is scheduled to be the budget, but it may have to be pushed to a special work session because it would have to go to the paper this Friday.
Yeah,
So it's gonna be dependent
Yeah.
on all of our
because
numbers.
we've had some, again, I'll talk through it as we're going through here, but they have to be done at 2 separate meetings.
Correct.
And, the clerk is required to get the max tax levy to the county no later than March 15th. Because then the county is required to notify, they still have to send out the letters to everybody.
So the
Shari.
county sends out the
Yeah.
letters saying what the proposed notice is for the school district along with the city. The city does not send those out. That's why it has to go to Department of Management. But you can't hold your meeting until April 1st.
Yeah.
So
'Cause you have to
So
allow
the
county.
information went March 15th.
it went March 5th.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah,
All that information was submitted to the county auditor, and she did verify receipt of it.
so then everyone should be getting a letter in the mail, if you haven't already, that identifies that information for you. And I think, Councilmember Dominguez, I think that's where Kaufman's headed with, you're gonna know what you're gonna have, because that's what they're trying to do is squeeze that back on the county a little bit more from a timeline, but essentially it all impacts all of our timelines. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So our goals, of course, are we want to maintain fiscal responsibility, we balance the budget and we manage our debt. Enhance revenue streams, we want to diversify our revenue sources, and when I say that is, do we look at alternative resources such as grants? we utilize maybe more of one levy tax like local option sales tax. If you remember with the past months, we've utilized some additional local option sales tax to help out with parks projects or with the library where we hadn't already budgeted before. Maximizing existing revenues, and boy, we maximize them. I think of a rubber band that really is being stretched as far as it can go right now is maximizing what we have with revenue. And you know, the bigger part of it is that, and all of this, we have to continue to improve our infrastructure, upgrade our infrastructure, sustain our, enterprise funds to make sure that we can continue to get bonding, along with that fiscal responsibility. We have to make sure we have transparency to the public at all times. And again, all of our reporting is filed. We do an annual audit. We have to file all of our, budgets with the Iowa Department of Management. We do our audit reports, go to the state auditor. So our transparency is there. It's just what's an additional step the city can do is communicating with the public where they find that information. One is contacting the city for it, but also making sure that they have access to those websites where they can go and they can access that information themselves. And again, our communication specialist has been working. We've been pulling some things from the league and trying to utilize that so we can get that communication to our public for where that information can be found. Support economic development. As we already know, I mean, part of growth is that economic development. But economic development doesn't necessarily always mean, you know, industry going up, bricks and mortar going up. You know, economic development is supporting and sustaining what we already have, expansion of our businesses that we have. In addition to that, it's also, does economic development mean in the next 10 years, the expansion of housing in our community to support? So maybe we don't have the industry here, but we have, you know, housing that supports the workers that may be commuting to other communities. It seems like we grow closer to Iowa City all the time, even though we're in a different county, since we're the furthest out from Muscatine. It just seems like it's closer and closer with Iowa City all the time. And enhance our public services. So to be honest with you, the public really doesn't care about those things until they need to care about those, until they, you know, something occurs that, or they read something and then they'll come in. But the biggest thing is the enhance of the public services. So that's the thing is quality of life. You know, if the pool doesn't open, you know, that's gonna get more attention versus, you know, some of these other things. Or, you know, for example, if they are not able to utilize our library, let's say our library is having to be closed more because we don't have the dollars to be able to support the library being open, then all of a sudden people notice because they're impacted by those quality of life and those services. In addition to that, the public safety, you know, so when those calls can't be made or when we don't have the safety, you know, those are the things that attract people to saying, what's going on? So, but again, trying to keep consistent with our transparency and our financial obligations. So what's the challenges? So property tax revenue impact of the 718, the new legislation introduced these key limitations. I already talked about them a little bit where they condensed into versus having multiple opportunities to levy, they condensed what we could do with it. And so right now, ours is 8.33 is the maximum that we are levied at. And what that includes is our tort liability. So we can pull a percentage of our property insurance from levying, but that's all we get to pull now from that. Then you have to take in employee benefits, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. We have a small percentage that we can levy to help offset the costs of employee benefits. And those would be your IPERs. And that is also health insurance, for our, and again, it doesn't total, those two total together are 547,000. I think I probably should do, when we get through this, I'll probably have the number that tells you what the actual general, just the general fund, not the enterprise, not the utilities, but just the general fund costs for employees. I can tell you probably more than exceeds what we can actually levy for. But hey, we're not gonna, whatever we can get to help balance our budget out. So, so the property tax breakdown, how it works when we pay our taxes, a lot of our community members think that that's 100% is gonna come to the city that you live in. But that's not how property tax works. And so, Brittany provided us a nice, idea here as to how property tax actually works. So we do get a good percentage of the pie, but we share that with our school primarily. So, okay. And so for how is it impacting this year? So, the last two previous years, our property levy rate was 1408. And it's based on $1,000, for your property tax evaluation. This year it goes to 1350. So what that is that it shrank our general fund revenues by, around $60,000. So when we were already struggling with a general fund, and you take out 60,000, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it certainly is. It's one full-time employee. It's significant in programming in our library. It's, a summer operations at the pool. So it's pretty significant. Again, we are pretty fortunate because we've had some new housing go up that are already on the tax roll. So that kind of cushioned our blow. However, when you cut, and I didn't put the calculation of the rollback because it's too late in the evening to start going through all of that. But when you take into, on top of this, there was already the rollbacks on our property taxes. And it's not just, this isn't just with residential, with rollbacks, it's your commercial, your ag. So what that does is it depreciates your percentages every year on top of what you should be getting. I know I did some research and I wanted to say in 2010 or 2012, the city was at, like 850,000 just in property tax. And so last year, the last couple of years, we kind of shrank down to like 680. But because we have new tax on a property tax roll, we were able to come back up to the 700,000 just in property tax. So
That was because of the new buildings.
yep, some of the new property, not the Bices, but there were out on, what is it? Wild Prairie, we had some new homes that were built out there that
Behind the doctor's office.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, they finally hit the tax roll. And then also the work that's being done downtown, because those are multi-purpose. So then that brought up our tax rolls as well, because of them fixing up.
Will the Bicy properties go next year then, or?
So as soon as those homes, yeah, so what happens there is that's on a TIF rebate.
Oh, yeah.
So it will go into a tax roll, but we will have to rebate those dollars back. And then anything, I gotta look at our calculations again, because we have a percentage then that goes into the low to moderate income. And I wanted to say it's between 10 and 15% of that rebate that we get to set aside. And those are the dollars that, I know Ken and I had talked about utilizing for, like a revolving fund for, property owners in the community. So they could do apply for that and do home improvements. Because the purpose of that is to help, like slum and blight, or also to help, property owners increase the value of their homes. In addition to that, you can do some other incentives, maybe to, landlords. I'm not saying for here, but I know some people have incentivized landlords, so they do a better job with their properties through that as well, so. So for property tax revenue reduction, we've been reviewing our expenses, we've been working hard to, reduce those. I would say the largest reduction that has occurred this year has been in the Public Works Department. However, Adam and I were able to work through some numbers and we got creative. And so we're gonna be able to get equipment this year for them that they had slated on their capital equipment. When we first started off, I had to have a doom and gloom conversation with them here a few weeks ago saying I have to remove all the equipment off. But, again, when you have a supervisor that it takes the initiative to dig in, and that's what he did. He came back to me with a proposed recommendation. So we worked on it, we got creative, and we're gonna be able to at least purchase 3 pieces of the equipment that they had slated for, so. And again, I mean, the other part is looking at your fees. I know one of the conversations that I've heard is some cities are going to what they're calling franchise fees because they're not able to create the extra revenue, so they're looking at franchise fees. However,
Can you explain what that is too?
well,
To the best of your
Yeah,
ability,
to
cause
the best of
I
my-
think I know, but I'm not 100%.
I'm not real familiar with it, I'll be
Okay.
honest with you. I know I worked with it, under a previous city manager. It does give you the ability to reach out, for example, to like Mid-American, or you can reach out to some of your other commercial businesses. And you can implement what you call a franchise fee, and that's essentially a percentage of their revenue that you can fee them to put into your,
So like
your
Casey's
budget.
or Subway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. However, my thought process is that it's just gonna be an additional cost on the people in our
Right.
community.
It'll pass on. to them.
Right, and so when you're already looking at utility increases, you know, then it's difficult to go after a franchise fee and put more costs on our community members. I know, I think Mayor and I think we kind of heard at the conference, there's a lot of cities that implemented them, and now they're kind of backing off of
Yeah.
them, because it's generated some really negative.
Well, and yeah, you'll have people that don't choose to come to your community as a
Yes.
result of this, and
Yeah.
looking at communities that don't have it,
Yeah.
but, I would like to say on our fees for our services, I think, my monthly bill from West Liberty for all that I receive is somewhere around $122 a month, my electricity, garbage, sewer, water, all of that. My water and sewer on the property I own in Osceola, Iowa, is $81 just for water and sewer. Our rates.
Yeah,
in
mine's
that-
about 300 for like a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom ranch,
Mhm.
so. My parents is like 500 or 600 for that big blue
Yeah.
Victorian that they
Yeah.
have, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know, like, for example, Alliant and Mid-American just implemented some really huge
Yes.
utility rates,
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're not there, because it's coming, but at the same time, we're not the only ones that are in the position that we're in. Again, good fiscal management, planning, creating as I know Councilmember Dominguez and Councilmember Shiltz is familiar with some of the rates that we recently passed. But fiscal management is also implementing a rate that is, that you can build in. And it's not gonna be near the impact when you don't do the work and then all of a sudden you've got to raise rates. So if you schedule an annual rate increase of averaging 5%, over 10 years versus in 10 years, you raise your rates by 30%.
But we did pass something to where it's automatically gonna do that, right? Okay.
Yep, you did that with the electric, and we did it with the garbage,
And garbage recycling.
yep, and however,
Storm.
stormwater, however, well, that'll be some more discussion.
Oh, okay.
Because we recently found that there was, well, we've got some good news coming on the electric, but it still may not be enough to keep the rates where they're at.
Yeah.
And the water one is probably that one's gonna be a little bit more of an impact. Again, though, that's because the council you've inherited, the previous council chose not to implement a annual structure like what has been done since some of you have been on council. And because of that, then that's what's gonna impact those water rates significantly coming up. Okay. So again, I mean, this is just trying to give you an idea of the projected, how we continually lose because of the, reduction of so right now, it's really not much different than last year, the current budget we're working in. So we're about the same because again, we had some new properties on the tax roll. So we are very fortunate when you look at other communities than what they're going through. The other thing is, I would say, over the last 10 years, staff and council worked together. We've been a little more frugal. We've only spent what we needed to spend. But at the same time, we made good decisions about the tools and the equipment that we were purchasing to put us in a position where we're at today. Because we had staff that was working with some, well, would you say, Adam?
Not very good.
Some very dangerous
Very bad
pieces of
shape,
equipment,
yeah.
yes, and not dependable, so. But we have to make that investment in that, equipment, again, that's about sustaining employees too, because, what employee wants to get into equipment that's not real safe and, yeah. So another part of our challenges is always employee salaries and benefits, just like I was talking about, sustaining employees and being competitive. It's really difficult when you're trying to compete with other communities around you that have a significant higher property tax levy than West Liberty has. However, we have the same needs, if not more of the needs, because we have our fire and our ambulance and our police department serve the city of West Liberty, but they have the rural that they cover as well. We're fortunate with our partnership with the rural trustees to help cover those expenses. However, we have our city police department that are doing mutual aid and they're covering, a neighborhood that's not a part of our city limits. They're, many times they're going to Atalissa or Nichols backing up the county because they're short. There's been several times they've even had to go out to the Cedar County line or Johnson County line. And so when we went back to talking about the 7th officer, yes, it's gonna be a struggle, but the importance of sustaining our staff that we have, taking care of their health, their safety, and also hopefully positioning us well. So if we would have somebody that has another career opportunity, or more importantly, if we go into the SRO agreement, which I'm hopeful, that we're positioned well, that our staffing is at the level it needs to be for us to continue to be where we're at with that.
And at the same time, we haven't had to rely on the county to come into the city, which has been
No.
Very good.
Oh, and right now,
We're really good about continuously running 24-hour coverage.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
We've always made sure we've had something.
even when you had 3 officers, you folks were doing a good
Yeah.
job.
Right.
And honestly, right now, I think the county is a little more dependent on us because
Yeah,
they're
They're hiring right now. I keep getting their notifications.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a little past my prime, but.
I bet you could do. So aging infrastructure is always, and again, part of us working through this process and looking at a new engineer service is, it's been identifying a lot of information because you know, we've been working with B&K for so long, there's some complacency on both sides of it. Working with new engineers and just talking with them and interviewing with them. It's really sparked a lot of our interest and got us to ask some questions as well. So again, I mean, that's part of the capital improvement planning. Compliance and regulations is ensuring that we, you know, are regulated, all of our infrastructure, that when we're doing the street, projects, building projects, that we have all of the ADA accessibilities, fire, safety, all of those things. And unfortunately, none of that is inexpensive, right? So. And again, as I talked about, it's just, I mean, there is uncertainty. We could feel it when we were at the Capitol. I mean, and, you know, just the environment alone, and I'm not saying anything political. I'm just saying that I think no matter where you're at with it, I think it's just a transition. So there's just so many unknowns. It's difficult for us to set plans. I think that the one thing West Liberty has always been good, we are great adapters. We are versatile. We'll get through this and we'll continue to do what we're doing and quick on our feet when we need to be and make those changes, so. But unfortunately, with that comes community expectations. The community would like to have an aquatic center, and they would like to have a trail system that wraps around our community. They would even like to have a rec center. All at the same time, you know, they want beautiful streets, you know, to be able to drive on. You know, they don't want to have, you know, water pooling, of course, you know, so, most importantly, you know, I think about it too, it's like they don't think about the fire, the ambulance, or the police department until they need them. But, you know, that's the thing, is that understanding that these tax cuts are, I'm sorry, I'm calling them tax cuts. I know that they don't want them called tax cuts. So the reallocation or the reforming of the tax has just definitely left us with some really huge challenges. So again, we'll continue to work on our transparency. That was the first time I went to the legislative day. I told the mayor, I mean, I think getting in front of state and federal folks, getting ourselves out there, telling our story. Hopefully, you know, that'll get them to listen and pay attention. That's all we can do. If we hide and we don't, or if we don't get in front of them, then, you know, then not only limits the other people trying to tell their story.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I was just going to say, our meeting with Representative Kaufman was important because he chairs the Ways and Means, thank you,
Yeah.
committee on the state level. He did, or on the House side, he did, we were there with the executive director of the League of Cities and the president of the League of Cities, and also a young woman from a neighbor, who was a clerk from a
Lisbon.
neighboring community.
Yeah, I think it was Lisbon.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's right. So he did say that some new legislation would be coming out Friday. I haven't followed up with the league yet to see if they've had an analysis of that and
Yeah.
how that will impact us, so.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too that, and maybe you are gonna talk about it too, but just thinking about this coming year, to how we can be proactive in reaching out to the folks that are living right outside of West Liberty to kind of pitch what it would mean to join us or annex in
Mhm.
all the amenities that we would be able to provide
Yep.
to where they did not have to go to Iowa City or Coralville. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more we could do if those sitting right outside of us
Annexation.
would annex in.
Yeah.
But I feel like the only way we're gonna be able to do that, in a kind way, is to get them on board.
Yep.
Right, and that's the challenge.
Yep.
But that would solve so much of our problems, and it would be a huge benefit to those folks as well.
I think it's the work that, you know, having the opportunity to explain what they pay in their utility costs and what their proposed new tax. And through annexation, I mean, there is an opportunity when you're working through annexation, you can offer them a staggered rate to come into the city tax. In addition to that, I mean, again, is doing some comparables to say, because we're gonna continue to have to increase the utility rate. But if you're looking at the utility rate going up, I mean, just trying to show where the balance, and I think that's always been the conversation, or at least what's been presented to me, is that our tax rates are gonna go up, our tax rates are gonna go up. And I'm not saying that they're not going to go up, but just like you said, Dana, but what amenities do you get? What do you bring to the city by having those taxes? Because you're enjoying those services, but you're not, you're not paying for those services, so.
And that's something that I say frequently because I do live outside the city limits. Whereas like my stuff is going towards the county, it's not coming to the community that I actually am coming in and using the parks and using the library and doing those types of things. I think that people just need to be able to understand a little bit more. I have a better insight because I work for the city, so I can grasp it a little bit more, but I think if people had the opportunity to kind of hear about it, I think you would be able to get more people on board than what we had originally thought in the past. So,
Yeah, and by doing a comprehensive, an update to our comprehensive plan would allow us to have some of those town hall meetings, to have those conversations around annexation. So.
Oh.
That's a good point. Fund types, revenues and expenditures, I mean, it looks simple. However, government accounting is not as simple as it looks. So you have, most importantly in the general fund. So you have the general fund, and general fund is primarily made up of your property taxes, your revenue coming into it. You have some building permits, some fees, some fines, tickets, traffic tickets, parking tickets, those things all kind of wrap into. Then you have the programming. So the programming or the function that we run our general fund by is you have general government, which is city hall administration and you folks. And then you have public safety, is the police, the fire, ambulance, building inspection and animal control. And you have public works, which we do not utilize our public works as much as we used to under the general fund, simply because we don't have enough property tax. So it primarily goes to road use and the capital improvement project. So fund. So then you have recreation and culture, which is your library, your parks and recreation, your cemetery, and those primarily focus around the revenues that we get. Again, it comes from property tax, but it also comes from, recreation fees, pool, admissions, library, they do fundraising, they get some nice donations from their patrons. And then administration, the bigger part, human resources, probably the bigger part of our percentage, but it's also the other part is some of the administration. So you get a percentage goes to the clerk, percentage goes to the city manager, percentage goes to communications. But it's very small because we just do not have enough in our general fund. Bigger part of your huge wages that you folks are earning to do what you're doing here, so. Special revenue funds make up our most of them are other taxes levied, like local option sales tax, road use. But it also it includes federal grants or state grants, our American Rescue dollars. Those are within special funds. And your tax increment finance. And then kind of capital projects. That fund is primarily where when we borrow money to do street projects or building in projects that are outside of the utility funds or the enterprise funds, then the capital projects, the revenue of the bond goes through there and we expense through there. Debt service fund is where we pay all of our loans. And again, without having the budget up here, but we'll go through it when we put the budget in front of you. But the debt service levy, so on top of what we can levy for just property taxes, right now the state is still permitting us to levy for those loans. We haven't had to levy for those for nearly 7 years, because if you remember in the audit, they talked about how we over levied, and so we had a balance. So we have been saving our, taxpayers' money for nearly 7 years because we've been using of that tax to pay off general obligation notes that we have. So, but now they're gonna be okay too, because we can't levy much more. But what they're recommending is creativity, is they want your city to borrow more, they just don't want you to grow. So it makes it very complicated to pay that debt back. And the enterprise funds are your utilities. Water, sewer, solid waste, stormwater, wastewater, electric. What's up with putting electric first, Brittany? Just kidding. Yeah. I didn't even notice that. I was just giving her a hard time. So revenue, I know I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna try to also. Property tax, sales tax, state, federal grants, fees and charges and other revenues. That's what, the general fund revenues make up. So here's our max tax levy, and so I'm gonna move it. So what I was trying to explain here, so here's so up here, that 92,000 is our property tax valuation. And so, so here we had in 2024 and 2025, we remain the same, but you can see that we're at 770, 117. And the reason why we didn't drop as low as we could have is because we brought new property on. However, though, they reduced our, calculation for our tort liability, so that brings it down to 39,000 and change versus 44. And then these are our police and fire and FICA and IFRS, for the benefits. So I went out and I maximized those the best that I could without taking us over the 3% growth, just to help balance out a little bit more in our general fund. Let me see here. And then, so what happens is it does all this pre-calculation. We have record of what our debt service was before, but we haven't keyed in our debt service yet because we're not required to in order to meet the max tax levy. But that calculation is based off of our annual financial report. So we do 2 reports, we do a budget, and then when we close out the year end, we have to do what's called an annual financial report. And that provides the county and the Department of Management our actual spent numbers. So then they key those into this to come up with, to make sure that we're not exceeding our 3% growth. So, because if we do exceed that 3% growth, then we're in trouble.
Correct, we can't.
We just can't.
810. It will take us
Yeah.
down. 810 is the absolute maximum, but if you have over 3% growth, it will not allow you to collect that. So if we put on there that we were gonna collect the max and we had more growth, it would tell us to kick it back out until so we cannot collect that.
Isn't that easy to understand? Easy to
Yes.
So for this year, right now, our general fund, revenues are projected at 2,477,673. You say, how do we get there? Because I just showed you, essentially with our tort levy and our property tax, that's only $800 and some dollars. But how we get there, we'll go through it real quick, but the bigger part of it is all those additional fees, interest. We've been pretty good because interest has been better than it had been in the past. So we've been able to grow some of our stuff through interest funds. But it's the cost of services and fees and charges of services, that allows our fund, and then we transfer money in from special funds such as, the local option sales tax, the tax increment finance, that gets transferred in. So that helps us be able to balance out to pay for everything that we can pay right now through our general fund. The special fund there was just talking about, so we have Iowa Economic Development Authority grants, and so we have to show that revenue coming in when we get a matching grant. We have to show that expense going out when we reimburse. Our capital project outlay right now we're looking at is a little over $2 million. And that's due to a street project. The larger portion of that is a street project on 6th Street and Miller.
Yeah, East Sixth Street.
Yeah.
From the highway down.
That's gonna be another big one, similar to, it's gonna be a little more pricey, of course, because it's gone up. So I would almost bet when we're ready to really look at numbers, we're not looking at 1.8 million, we're probably looking at 2.2 million, if not more. So expenditures. So for our expenditures, you know, it's finding the funny balancing out over all of these projects. And everything here is everything you see here is gonna come through property tax, gonna come through general obligation loans. And then just like I said, fees, charges for services, but they're very minimal compared to the revenue you bring in on your enterprise, right? So, because again, we want people to enjoy living here at a lower cost. So it makes it challenging to say, I'm gonna charge you $10 to get into the public pool. You know, because the thing that people like about going to our pool is what? That it doesn't cost you $10 to get into the pool. However, our pool could sure use everybody paying, probably more than that. General fund expenditures are 2,477,673. A bigger part of the breakdown here is the general government costs are 448,100. And again, general government, again, is your administrative staff, our buildings and grounds, it's all tied in there. The economic development funding comes through the general government. Any of our TIF and our contracted services come through their wages. So the bigger part of it, I'm trying to remember now right off the top of my head, I think the bigger part of it is our economic development and our wages. Yep. Public safety, 2,462,695. So you see how tight we're getting, because in order to operate public safety in the city of West Liberty, that is a bigger percentage, but we have to have it. It's required by law. Even if it wasn't required by law, knowing us as West Liberty, I can't talk West Libertines, we would do it because it's important to us. Public Works, 523,790. They're estimated to bring in about 525,000 in revenue. See how tight, these are tight. Culture and Recreation, 999,024. I mean, again, you're talking nearly $1 million to give the community the quality of life it's not that they just deserve it, but they want it. And our special funds, we have 100,000 in that American Rescue dollars that has to be moved out this year to the ambulance department. So that's part of the expenditure. But the other 200,000 is that it's the balance between the grants. Road use tax, 523,790. I was estimating up a little bit when I was talking about it. Local option sales tax are gonna come in at, they're estimated to come in at 609, and 100% of that money is gonna go back out to projects and general fund tax relief. And a third of that is split between the library and the Parks and Rec projects. Tax increment finance, you passed this in December when we levied those taxes, and they go towards debt. It goes to rebates on properties. This may, you know, Dumont didn't turn in his rebates as I was thinking about it yet. So that will eventually go up here in the future, but right now we're still paying on the short street, Alta Ventures.
Yep.
So it kind of gives you an idea, our capital project outlay. The enterprise, for the most part, again, your city's not in business to make a profit, but you do need to make some profit in accordance to our compliance, because we're required to reserve or have a balance, a percentage of balance. It's usually 110% of our operating over, because that shows you in a good fiscal position for bonding to continue to borrow money. And the transfers were those that I was talking about putting into the general fund, primarily for the local option sales tax goes back in the TIP, the road, and not road use, but the employee benefits. So over revenues, well, I said revenues over expenses, so meaning that we got more money allocated to spend than we have for revenues. So in the general fund, we need to cut $876,000. I've been in conversations with the ambulance folks because $776,000 of that is with the ambulance fund. And that's, I think we made some headway today trying to understand each other.
What's their revenue usually, like 300?
It's been dropping.
It's typically between 200 and 205 maximum, and that's because of how the accounts receivable come in. Just because somebody is billed for something doesn't mean that we get the revenue for it.
Right.
Yeah. And Shari and I were talking, we're trying to track where the GMT money is coming in at, because I mean, it's being communicated to us that it's being refunded, but we're not seeing where that money comes in at. We're not seeing a state revenue, so we've got to do a little research on that. But again, I think the last time we did receive something was like $1,500.
Yeah. And then I did just see one through
Okay.
reconciliation, and I reached out, and it was like $2,061
Okay, so they
per
did get a little
quarter, I
more.
believe.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really make it that much of a difference.
It's a lot of administrative work, but again, you don't want to leave money on the table, so.
And then you also have your tiered payments that come in, so like if we have to go out and help another community, and then they're paying us, typically it's about $200 for that service call, depending on what
Yep.
type of call it is.
I think we
So,
estimate about $1,500 a year is what we plan to
and that's
see.
maybe, I would say like 800-ish is pretty typical for that.
So, we've been in some conversations, a bigger part of that is the new ambulance, but now they're saying that the ambulance needs to come off. That it's not, they're gonna order it, but it's not gonna be here until 2027. And then there were some questions about wages again. And the thing is just trying to help them understand that we have to estimate based on the hours that are being provided to us. And we have to calculate those, and no, the actuals haven't been looking like but that's because they are not able to get staffed. And, and again, but if they're able to get staffed, then we have to set that estimate to be based off if they're able to be fully staffed, so. The enterprise, I've just got a little work to do, and I think that's gonna be, mostly that's in that's the water. Because we are still waiting on those, promised upon, wage or, rate study that we heard about, that we believe exists. I've been told that they're estimating it's gonna be a 15% increase for the next five years, because we failed to stay on top of the rate. And it was in our audit this year that we fell below our covenant. So I asked them to bring me what that means in a dollar amount.
Like what's falling below covenants?
So you're required, by your bonding, that you have to maintain 110%, of revenue over your expenditures, your operating expenses. And we're failing to do that because we just don't our infrastructure needs more work than we are bringing in to cover the costs. So unlike, this is the first time since I've been here that I've ever had to bring council an unbalanced budget, because we're still we're waiting on some information. We have to get a little more creative in some areas, but, by April 1, I'll bring you a balanced budget, so. I may not have a lot of happy people, but, we'll do the best that we can. I think if everybody remembers, I said last year that, this would be our last budget, that we're probably gonna have the flexibility. I still think we were able to give most all of our departments, their needs. We all need more, but, and hopefully we'll be able to maintain this and see that property tax, but just like you said, Dana, I think, we definitely have to get more vested in annexation and looking at the opportunities to work with, existing that's out there, so. I'm not gonna go through the capital improvement project because I guess I'll bring that back to you. Any questions you have, if you wanna call me, we can sit down and we can go through everything one-on-one. I think the bigger part of it is that when we get to the budget, we'll kind of hit it again, so.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got 3 minutes, I think, till council meeting, so if there are some questions now, we can direct those towards Lee, or like you said, being able to get in touch with her, anytime to do this. And we will make the, presentation available to, Mayor Pro Tem McFerrin and to, Councilmember Martinez.
I
So,
think we usually post it online too, so, yeah.